Hey guys, this is Olivia with occupationalolivia.com. Today, I'm excited. It's going to be the first episode of my online video show and podcasts. In this show, I'm going to be interviewing experts and we're going to talk about things like careers, business, psychology, strategic thinking, whatever I think that's going to add value to you and help you advance your career. This episode, you will definitely want to set aside time to watch. Scott Barlow is amazing. He is an expert at happentoyourcareer.com, where he helps hundreds of people figure out exactly what they want to do with their lives. And that's a pretty huge mission. I know when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career, it wasn't exactly a very smooth process. But what Scott does is he takes this big topic and he breaks it down into a puzzle and he helps you put together the pieces. If you're willing to put the work in, you're definitely going to want to sign up for his free 8-day video course, and I'll link to it at the bottom. But first, check out this episode. You'll understand exactly what you need to do to figure out what you want to do with your career, and then also you'll understand what barriers hold people back from finding work they love. Definitely check this out. You will not be disappointed. So Scott, I'm curious, I've been looking at your background. Obviously you have a lot of HR experience, but more importantly, I want to go back to your life experiences. And I'm curious what makes you so great at helping people with their careers and figure out what they want to do and what you think it is.
That is quite the question. I thought you were going to start off with a softball type question.
No, we're going deep immediately.
Jam into it. For anybody, I think that there's a variety of dots you connect, points you connect, things like that, that as you look back, it becomes very, very apparent. And my friend David Ralph says this all the time. He's got a whole show about it on Join Up Dots. But I really think that it was that combination of initially really going through that frustration and actually later got fired from a job. I had my own business for a very short while that helped me pay my way through college in the painting industry, believe it or not. And then after that point, I got into the first job that I really thought I could get. That's what it came down to. So I sort of fell into that job. And it was a general manager type role. I was doing anything and everything, and it was a terrible fit. I was bad at it. I was really bad at it. So they fired me, and they should have fired me. I didn't think that at the time, but I was not doing very well in it, and I'm so glad they fired me. And after I got over about 1 or 2 days of moping around and feeling sorry for myself, I decided that I was never again going to do work that didn't fit me, that I didn't enjoy. And that's what kicked everything off. So I started going about the process of figuring out how to make career transitions. And that was pretty hard at first. I mean, partially because I was there in the moment and, my wife and I had a whole bunch of debt and, we're thinking about having kids and we had, the mortgage and for some reason we'd gone out and bought our dream cars, even though fresh out of college, and I don't know, we did all kinds of stupid stuff, whatever. Right. But so I'm there having to try and figure out how do I reconcile these two things, this want to not go into another job that doesn't fit me, that I'm really bad at, and something that I do enjoy, with how do I do this immediately, right? Because of all these other external pressures. So I started out not really knowing exactly what to do, but I took some of the sales skill and marketing skill that I'd learned through owning a business and then through that past job and started applying that. And so I ended up interviewing with places like Nike and Target and Dish Network and all these other, pretty large, fairly well-respected companies, and ended up getting a couple of job offers. And it's like, wow, okay, there's maybe something to this. And that was kind of my first introduction. And then later on, people would hear my story. That's what would happen. They'd ask me how I got to whatever job it was. I think maybe Target was one of the big ones where I interacted with a lot of different people. And I was doing HR for Target, and my coworkers were like, "Wait a minute, how did you get in here? Like, they don't hire people directly into HR. Usually, you do a couple other roles first, and then this other thing, and whatever." And it's like, how did you skip all that? And so I'd tell them my story, and they'd be like, "Hey, well, I got this friend who really wants to make this career transition. Would you go have coffee with them?" And I'm kind of a coffee fanatic. So I would go and they would buy me coffee and I'd talk to them about what I did. I thought it was like the best possible deal ever. It's like, wait a minute, free coffee? Okay, deal. But then I found, Olivia, the really, really interesting thing to really answer your question is I found that I was actually able to help people and I was actually able to give them advice that was useful. So it wasn't just me getting the benefit of coffee. And it took me a couple of times to really see that. And then people started offering to pay and people started like sending gift cards and thank you notes and things like that. And that's really what kicked it all off.
Wow.
So it was a progression.
That's a great story. You've really been through a lot. It sounds like just you kind of had to go through the pain before you really figured it out, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I really think that I've got a lot of interests and there's lots of things I really enjoy doing and talking to people and helping them develop themselves or figure out what they want is just one of them. But this is the one that made the most sense for me after I started actually putting it down on paper and actually being intentional about it later on with the whole, what on earth do I want to do and how do I actually figure that out?
Yeah. So. And I'm excited to get into that more formal process, but we'll hold that off. Yeah. I'm curious. So you've been in HR for over a decade. You've helped a ton of people with happen to your career. Sorry, I just butchered that. Happen to your career.
It's kind of hard to say. I didn't realize that until after I named it.
Right.
It looked really good on paper and the thought was good. And then everybody's like, happen to your what? Like happiness to your what? Yeah. That's funny. Live and learn, right? Stuck with it now.
Well, what I'm getting at is there's a lot of people in jobs that kind of lean on their company or their manager. To help them out with their career, what do you think's missing in most work environments that you see with people wanting help from their companies or managers to help them figure out what their next move is?
I was just talking to a guy named Greg Giangrande. He's the EVP of HR for Time Inc. And I was talking to him about this exact subject. So this is kind of something that fascinates me because I believe that people need to be able to take control of their own careers, but most people don't necessarily know how to do that. And then what we were talking about was why people don't know how to do that, and then why people don't necessarily even know that they can do that, I guess is the other thing. So I think that there's a couple of different answers to that question. One, on the why people don't necessarily know that they even can do that is because I don't think that people in our society are raised with those types of beliefs, and not to down on our society or anything along those lines. That's not what I'm saying. But one of the things that I've noticed in talking to lots and lots of people that have been able to get where they want to go and intentionally identify that in that take control of their career type way is they've had something in their lives injected, whether it be support through their parents or whether it be support through mentors or people that have essentially taken them aside or repeatedly said, "Hey, look, you can do whatever you want to do, and you can actually have more control over that process than you think that you can." And so that's a commonality that I've seen with many different people that have had success in that, and that was something that Greg pointed out too again, and that's where it kind of struck me. It's like, oh my goodness, every single person that I've talked to has said something really, really, really similar. But then the other thing, to really answer your question, I really think that if people, or if you really start to identify what they want and then use those managers or mentors or whoever it might be, if you really start to identify, the things that you're great at, or really start to identify the things that you actually want, then that really starts to pave the way for everything else. And I've already said that once, so I feel like I'm starting to go into broken record here, but that's something that I really firmly believe, and that's something that I see over and over again. And, as people get clarity on what they value and how they enjoy spending their time, and how they, can spend time doing things that they are great at, then more and more the answers become obvious of how to move forward, and how to build relationships, and the right types of relationships to build, and what the pathway is. It just starts to become clearer and clearer and clearer as you get clarity in those other areas of your life. So it's almost backwards from what most people think to some degree. So
No, absolutely. I'm curious. So you go through this process, and it's pretty complicated to just figure out what you're good at, what your strengths are. For those people that finally figure out what their strengths are, what do they struggle with along the way with that process? Because it's pretty messy. It's not black and white. And I'm sure you've dealt with people that are probably like me, want to put everything in a box sometimes.
Yep.
So what is the struggle there, and why do you think they struggle with that process?
Well, you've got a lot of great questions here. And I hate when people say that actually in interviews, but truly compliment. You've got a lot of really good questions, partially because it's really making me think, and partially because I think it's getting to the heart of the matter. And I think what they struggle with the most really is wanting to quantify everything in advance. Mm-hmm. So what do I mean by that? I guess really what I mean is that most of us really want to understand what the output is going to be prior to putting in any work whatsoever. And I think that's part of what drives us to want to put things in a box that we know. And part of it is psychological. That's how our brains work. We're like, we associate things with other things that we know, right? But most people really don't want to put in the effort unless they know exactly where it's going to end up. So that, I think, is a really, really, really big struggle for people. They're like, why am I going to spend all of this time, really writing this stuff down on paper and making mind maps or whatever? There's lots of different ways that you can go about it in order to really discover what it is that you're great at, or those types of things that you enjoy. But honestly, going through that process, any way that you go through it, there's going to be lots of information that you're going to output that you're not going to use. It really is part of the process. And most people don't want to put in that type of time or effort because they believe that it's a waste, because they're not looking at, and I hate to use a cliche, but they're not looking at the journey as part of the actual piece that's worth it. They're looking at the end result. And this is the only reason I know this, aside from seeing lots of different people go through the same thing, is I experienced this for myself. And I still have to this day, remind myself that it's not necessarily always about the end result. And especially in the US, I mean, we're very, very, very end result driven, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a big reason. But the other piece that people struggle with is they want to come out with a job title.
Right.
And you and I were talking about this. We were talking about some of the fascination around that. People want to come out with a job title, and you had made the point, I think, in a previous conversation, that job titles don't even necessarily mean the same thing from one organization to another, as far as what you do and how you spend your day and all these other things. And I thought that was such a great point, because it's really true, but it really helps you understand that job titles are irrelevant to some degree. And it's much more important to understand how you want to spend your time and the ways that you want to do that. So I think people are focused on the wrong target, and that's part of what causes them to want to put everything in a box too.
No, absolutely. I think people want to find this perfect golden opportunity without going through any of the pain that to get there. And,
Yes.
and so it's a little bit of that. I think as I see it a lot with my generation too, just they want to have that immediate gratification, just like you said. So I think it's partially just all the immediate social media, everything's at your fingertips. So it's pretty interesting. And people are online a lot, and they don't have those soft skills that, just talking to people anymore and thinking through those softer things, because we're all very connected but disconnected in a way. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great answer. So I'm curious. I talk to a lot of newer grads. They don't have a lot of work experience to really build off of. What advice would you give to those people on figuring out what they want to do?
I've interviewed, I guess, several thousand people that for different types of jobs. Mm-hmm. And then I've interviewed, I guess 100+ people or so for like media style interviews, trying to understand and break down how they've had the success that they've had, and particularly around this type of process. And I point that out because the common themes that I've seen again and again and again is those people that are not afraid to go experiment and to go actually get in there and try different things in various different formats. And that means something different to everybody. But where they're willing to actually get in there and try it and get that feedback, that internal feedback that allows them to reflect on, hey, I loved this type of thing. I didn't enjoy this type of thing. Wow, I surprised myself at how quickly I learned and got good at, this skill set, talking to people in this particular way, whatever it happens to be. That allows you to very, very quickly start to eliminate possibilities, because I think that's really what your career is about, is not, it's partially discovering things that are new for yourself. But I think the more and more information that you have, it's about eliminating the things that don't make sense for you and ruling those things out. Exactly. And then only focusing on the things that really do actually line up. So some really specific advice that I would give is two things. And I've heard you say this, and I absolutely love this. When you came on my show, I thought this was great. And I've heard a couple of different people say it, but you put it in a really, really great way. Your approach of just picking up the phone or getting on LinkedIn and contacting different people and talking to them about what they actually do. Like, not even so much worrying about their job title, but what they actually do. And that causes two things. And I loved that as a tactic, because it allows you to start building relationships at the exact same time as you're getting that discovery for yourself. So I love that. And then the other thing I would say is start a project. And what I mean by start a project, first of all, a project, because that's something that's short term. And I think when people think about careers, they're like, what am I going to be doing for the rest of my life? And, if you go into it with that type of pressure around a decision, oh my goodness, you're probably not even going to decide, or you're going to end up someplace else or settle for something else or whatever, right? So don't want you to put that type of pressure on yourself. And one of the ways that you can do that is by starting a project, which is just for a defined period of time. So, I encounter people all the time that want to, they want to start in HR, or they want to write, or they want to, insert your whatever you want to do here. But a lot of times there's different ways that you can do that, just by meeting different people and just by adding value to those individuals. Like what you've got going at Occupational Olivia. I mean, let's say that somebody decided that they were interested in the same types of things. I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't start a blog or start a website and then just begin exploring it, begin writing about it, or begin interviewing people about it, or, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be the same topic. It can be anything you want, from photography to I don't know. I'm struggling for stuff. We should mention that it's 5:30 a.m. That's how devoted we are to this. But I really think that just jumping in and starting a project and starting to get experience where everybody else is actually sitting on the side and everybody else is like, how do I get the experience? Because I'm going to need the experience to be able to get the job, and they won't give me the job because I don't have the experience. It's like, go get the experience. I've got a good friend named Mark McClung, and he's got you can check out his website. He has a website called My Daily Mark. And one of the things that he's done in his career, he's a marketing manager for Hyundai, but he's had all these side projects along the way. And, he just started doing marketing for different people because that's something that he was interested in, knew that he was interested in it, didn't really have any experience in it a whole lot. So he put up a website and started trying different things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay to do, even if it doesn't work out. And that's, again, back to that. People want to understand what the output is going to be before they're willing to put in the inputs. So just start.
Yeah, no, I love that. I like the idea of just getting some low pressure projects because there's no deadline. There's no really time sensitivity you can't really lose. It's just growing
it's
yourself.
Fun.
Yeah, no, it should be fun or you wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I like that. Okay, my next question. Figuring out what you want to do seems overwhelming because it's such a big topic. I'm curious, how do you break that up into smaller pieces so some of us can deal with it and, start to actually act on it?
Okay, so I'll give you the format that we use, and I use the same exact format whether we're doing coaching for hundreds of dollars an hour, or whether whether it's giving away advice for free or something along those lines, or our course, figure out what fits, something in between. And the framework that we use and the way that we help people think about it is that you have to first do things in a certain order. It's kind of like a puzzle, right? Right. So most people have put together a puzzle. If you have been a kid, been around kids, have kids, whatever might fall in between there, then you've probably put together a puzzle at some point. So the funny thing about a puzzle is there is a very efficient way to do it and a very, very inefficient way to do it. So I didn't realize this was a good analogy until I was sitting on the floor with my 4-year-old, and I was trying to help him figure out, like, how do you put together, because he's like grabbing all the pieces and he's like trying to shove them together. He's like, these go here. It looks like it, he's cramming them all together. It's like, oh, hold on, Grayson. Like, all right, you see these pieces? These are the corner pieces. And, with any puzzle, if it's a rectangle, there's probably 4 corner pieces, right? And so that those are there right away. So you pull out those corner pieces, and then you find all the edge pieces, right? The edge pieces are going to be fairly easy to put together, and then you can start to build in the frame. And then the funny thing is, once you get that frame together, then you can start to see the picture without even knowing what it is. Like at my house, I've got 3 little kids, so like we lose the boxes and the pictures and stuff all the time. So we find ourselves in that exact situation where, we've got to figure out what this picture starts to look like without actually knowing what it is beforehand. So that's how we go about it. In finding out and figuring out what it is that is right for you and what you enjoy doing and what types of work makes sense for you is very much like that puzzle, because those corner pieces, that foundation, I would say, is very much your strengths, because those aren't going to change a whole lot. They're going to be developed over time. And as you really start to master them and get better and better at them, and they become what we call signature strengths, then those are going to be there. But you're successful because of your strengths. You're not successful because you're constantly mitigating your weaknesses or spending tons and tons of time like taking something you're bad at from here to just marginally better. Like that doesn't make you successful, right? It's because of those strengths. So we start with those corner pieces, which are the strengths. And then that's a place that often we can, and I'll give you an exercise before we get off the call, but that's a place that you can start with. And then those edge pieces are really very much what you want in your life. And it creates that frame. It creates the framework, actually. So what you want in the rest of your life, like if I know that for me, I know that I want to be doing work that allows me to travel, that allows me to enjoy spending time with my kids, for not just the big things like the school plays and whatever else, but also the small things, just day to day. I want to be able to drop them off at school when I want to drop them off at school. So there's lots of work out there that won't allow me to do that, whether I'm owning a business or whether I'm working for somebody else, right? So I know that if that's something that I really want, then there's going to be lots of other things that don't fit into that final picture. So what I want in my life, and we usually guide people in several different areas. So financial, fitness or health or wellness, and then relationships, whether that be, social or whether that be significant other, family, all of those things that fall into the relationship category. And then your environment, which that can be everything from geographic location to the type of culture that you want to work in or with and around. So we've got all these different types of categories, 5 in total, that we guide people to work through, and that creates that framework. After you figure out what you want in each of those areas, it really starts to allow you to put a box around it. And people like boxes. We talked about that, right? So you've got that framework, and then you can start to fill in the picture. And the funny thing is, it's so much easier, just like building a puzzle, so much easier to not have to try and jam the pieces together, which is what most people are doing. Most people are doing exactly what my 4-year-old Grayson does. They're trying to take this piece over here, and it's like, well, there's a little bit of green, and it doesn't work. And people get overwhelmed and they get frustrated, and they're like, I don't even know how to narrow this down. So the much, much better way to go is start with your strengths, be able to go through what it is that you want in the rest of your life, really put definition and clarity around that, and then the picture starts to fall into place. And then the way that you can actually use that, we have people come out with what we call a decision profile, and it allows you to evaluate different types of opportunities for yourself. And because a lot of times things either look really bad or really good, right, and it's totally emotionally driven. And instead, we try and put a little bit of objectivity to that through this process where you can say, no, that really doesn't line up for me. And here's why. It's because I want these other things, and that's not going to allow me to be able to get these other things if I take this opportunity or if I go after this opportunity. And then those are the types of things that really start to allow you to fill in that picture. And even if you get part of the picture filled in, you can start acting on it right away. You don't have to know the whole story to be able to actually move forward. Just like, when we're building a puzzle at home here, we might be able to tell that it's Mickey Mouse long before we get the whole puzzle put together, right? We do lots of Disney puzzles. So
no, that's great. It sounds like a lot of self-reflection and thinking about your values and life as a whole, and not just your career. So that's interesting.
Well, here's the funny thing about this process, Olivia. I found that very often people get what they want. In those thousands of interviews, most people, I'd say at least a third, maybe closer to 50%, and I'm totally estimating, but come in and say, I want a good job with a stable company that allows me to grow. Like I've heard that I don't know how many times, or variations of that. What's that?
That sounds pretty just generic.
It is. It's totally generic. It's totally generic. And I'm taking themes and everything like that. Some people are more specific and but that's the overall theme. And that's exactly what they find, because that's what they're saying. That's what I want. That's what they find again and again. But they're not stopping to think that, well, maybe that particular company will allow me to grow, but it's not the right company to grow with for me. Or maybe stable isn't necessarily equating to what I want in all of these other categories for the rest of my life, because you can't really separate out your career from all of these other things. Like your career really dictates a lot of what your financial area of your life looks like, or what your ability to be healthy and well looks like, or vice versa. Those things impact your career too, right?
Absolutely.
So there's just no way to separate this stuff out. So if you go in and you decide this is what I want and haven't done that work up front, then you're probably going to get exactly what you want.
Yep, that makes complete sense. So with the people you've helped and have worked with to get there, what about those that didn't get there? What's the biggest issue and biggest barrier that keeps them from finding the work they love?
It's 100% mind barriers. There's really nothing else. I mean, it is 100% mind barriers. I find that a lot of people are not very practiced at thinking bigger. I find that a lot of people, even people that we would consider to be like you or I might look at on the outside and say, wow, this person's pretty successful. I find that a lot of people are really struggling with internal self-talk in terms of like, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that that's right for me. And then they talk themselves out of different things. In fact, the most common thing that I've heard again and again and again with people that I've helped is they say things like, Scott, I'm so glad you pushed me to go and apply for that job, even though I wasn't actually qualified for it. Or I'm so glad you pushed me to go and talk to that person. And what they're really talking about is that internal self-talk that was going to stop them from trying anyways, or stop them from moving forward anyways, or stop them from taking that extra step anyways. And whether that is, applying for a job, or whether that is, making a contact or making a relationship, or figuring out what it is that you actually want, it comes from the same place. And it's typically those mental barriers and those fears of what might happen, or the potential of getting rejected, or those other fears that pop up and crop up and stop us from taking any action anyways.
No, that makes complete sense. So some people, it sounds like, just give in to the fear and they just they can't handle walking through past it.
Most people. And
wow.
Let's be honest, fear is scary, right? So I mean, I understand, but also you're right. At the end of the day, I don't think the fear ever really goes away.
Right.
What doing is be able to recognize that that's just a fear, and then standing up and walking past it, even though it's still scary.
No, that's great. I see the same thing too. People, it's their own mental barriers that keep them from wanting to take action.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate because, that's where the magic happens.
That is where the magic happens.
Okay. Well, I know that you and I both have seen a lot on careers. What do you think the common bad or just not true advice out there that you see that you want to just call out right now?
I see variations of it all the time, but I think that people feeling like they have to settle for a good job, because there's so many people out there that are talking about, wow, you have to that's a great job. Like, why would you want to do anything else? And people's parents saying, I want you to do exactly this. So all of the advice that I've seen really kind of falls into the theme of what other people want for you or think that you should do, right? Yeah. And I think that any advice that has a should in it, you should probably ignore. What you what you should, because that's not what you want, and you're the only person that can decide what it is that you want and know yourself well. And no, like, nobody else knows you better than yourself. And maybe you haven't figured out exactly what those things are, but nobody else is going to figure it out for you. Nobody else is capable of figuring it out for you. So the sooner you get started, the better, because otherwise you're totally relying on those shoulds, and you're totally relying on somebody else's version of what you want. And that never matches up, ever.
Did you ever have that in your life?
Yeah, that first job that I was talking about that I got fired from. I I was looking at that as my friends were telling me like, well, you've already got a job offer going out of school. It's like, oh man, take it, take it. And they're saying things like that. And my parents were, they were trying to be very supportive, but they're urging me to do kind of the same thing. They also said, it'd be good to look around a little bit. I think I ignored that advice because it was easier to just go ahead and take it.
Right.
So I think that they were trying to tell me that that this looks like a great opportunity and you should take it, but it's always good to look around a little bit. So yes, in various different fashions, I guess, and I get that all the time. I mean, I was on. Oh, do you know Natalie Sisson?
That name sounds familiar.
So she runs
I
the
think I've heard
Suitcase
it.
Entrepreneur. She has this
Oh,
amazing
okay.
business, and
Oh, great.
she spends most of her time traveling and everything like that, and whatever. But I was on her, and she's somebody who I really respect, and I really absolutely love her business. But I was on her podcast, and she gave me some advice, and she's like, I think you should go after these markets, and because I had taken the time to figure out what it was that I wanted, and because I knew and understood that up front, as instead of saying, "Yeah, Natalie, you're right," because she's somebody I totally respect, and I love her work and everything else along those lines, and I absolutely look up to. Instead, I'm like, no, here's the reasons why it doesn't make sense. I really appreciate the advice. That is amazing. And I think you're probably right, but it doesn't line up because of these things that I want over here. And I think that's the point that I would push everybody to try and get to where you can say, no, I understand what lines up for me. And here's why this doesn't line up. Thank you so much for the advice. I really appreciate you caring enough to share that with me. Here's why I'm not going to do it.
No, that takes a lot of just awareness of your values at all times.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
pretty
And I mean, I
cool.
run a business that
Right.
that's what we do. So I kind of have to practice what I preach.
Exactly.
So
No,
there's
that's
that.
great.
But yeah, absolutely.
So tell us about HTYC, and I'm curious. You have a great job right now, so tell us about what made you start it, and then just how you really got the ball rolling.
Yeah. So I by day, if you want to call it that, although it's all the things I do are at various different times during the day, night / whatever. But yeah, I work as an HR guy for a fairly large company, pretty amazing organization actually. And I started there maybe almost 5 years ago, and they have given me completely amazing opportunities. But when I hired on, I told my boss at the time that, hey, probably 7 years in or so, I'm probably going to start looking back to go into my own business again, and that's something that I really want. Well, I got a couple of years into this, and I started having different opportunities in the organization, and that was going to require some moves. And my wife and I really started evaluating what it was that we wanted, and decided that, oh my goodness, we really want to be in the area we're already in. Really want to have a business again. Why wouldn't we just do this now? So that's what kicked off H2IC. And I was going through this. I was kind of creating, I guess you could say, this process that now we teach to other people at the time. And I was doing it for myself to really get clear on what it was that I wanted, and what we wanted as a couple and as a family and everything else. And I realized that I needed to go back to doing that. And as soon as I made that decision, I got all of these opportunities that I had to turn down at the company that I thought that I wanted. I figured by now I would be a VP in HR someplace at some company or another. And after a couple of years ago, realized that really wasn't what it was that lined up with all of these other things. So HTYC came about because of the types of experiences that we talked about at the beginning. It's like, wow, I'm already doing this. I'm already doing it for free. This is something that, like, I'm spending my time, like somebody else might go golfing, and I love golfing, but I was turning down golf opportunities to go and have these types of conversations. It's like, wow, there's probably something to this. So that makes sense in hindsight. But everybody's got something like that. Everybody's got something where they're already doing it to some degree, and they just don't know that they're already doing it because it's not apparent when you're actually in it. Only looking back does it become apparent. So that's what kicked off the initial HTYC, and I just decided, wow, I want to help people explore their careers and start to really get what they want and take control of it. And that's what the initial decision was, and it's evolved over time into really what we do is help people identify those things that they can be great at, that they really want, and find work that fits them, and then help them make it happen. So that's the short version, believe it or not. And,
That's
and
a
it's
great
evolved
story.
quite a bit.
So tell us what you're working on over there.
Yeah. So we've had so many projects in the last 2 years. We've got 4 people involved in the business. We're all doing it part-time at this point. I plan on making a transition to at least me going full-time here in a few months from now. And that being the case, we've got a class and a course actually that we just rolled out. It's called Figure Out What Fits, and that's something that we're having a ton of fun with, and it takes people through this exact type of process. And we've also even got this mini course as well. That's almost a precursor to that people can get for free. And actually, because I don't know, we might run out of time here in just a little bit, but one of the things we can do is we can set that as a gift up for your viewers, to where we can here's what we can do. We can set it up so happentoyourcareer.com/Olivia. Would that work?
That works. That's great.
Okay. And then people can find that, and then they can go through that process and see it and do that for free. So that 8-day mini course that helps you figure it out. So if you're interested in that, we'll set that up and
yeah, absolutely. And we can link to it below.
Perfect. But some of the things that we've got coming up, we have made this commitment this year. We want to help 357 people get on the road to work that they really want to be doing. So we call that Project 357. And that's a big thing that's going on in the background and driving all of these other projects.
Wow.
So
you're a busy guy.
It is extremely busy. It's extremely fun. It is very difficult. It's forcing me to be very, very good at managing my time between, the HR work that I do and then the business, which we're growing on the side. And yeah, but it is so much fun.